So, like, you know how we're always going on and on about, that big dream we're always chasing, like that novel we want to finally sit down and write, or that new skill we want to master, or, hey, maybe it's even that promotion we're hoping to get at work.
Yeah, totally. Like, we all have those goals,
Yes.
just simmering there in the back of our minds.
Right, exactly. And, you sent over this really fascinating podcast episode the other day all about goal setting. And I gotta say, they, took all the best advice out there and boiled it down into this super practical guide.
It really is brilliant. I think that's what's so great about this source. It feels like an actual roadmap. Like, you wouldn't just hop in your car and set off on a cross-country road trip without directions, right?
Nope.
This episode, it's like having those turn-by-turn directions, but for your goals.
I love that analogy. And speaking of road trips, our first stop on this goal-getting journey is, defining our goals clearly. The episode talks about using the SMART criteria: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. It's a classic for a reason, I think. But sometimes it helps to actually see it in action.
Oh, absolutely. So, okay, let's say your goal is to write a novel, which, by the way, you've mentioned you want to do. So a SMART goal for that could be something like, I want to write 500 words every single day for the next 3 months. That's specific. It's measurable.
Yeah.
It's definitely achievable. And it's obviously relevant to your dream. And it has that clear time frame.
Okay, yeah, I see how that really brings it into focus. But hold on. It's not just about jotting it down on a napkin or something, right? The podcast really emphasized making it, official.
Yes. It's like you're taking this goal that's kind of floating around in your head and giving it an actual physical form. There's something really powerful about the act of physically writing it down.
Yeah.
Like, research actually suggests that it helps solidify your intention. It's almost like you're signing a contract with yourself.
You know what, while we're talking about this, I'm actually grabbing a notebook right now. It's funny how even just hearing about it makes me want to act on it. So, hey, everyone listening, I encourage you, grab a pen and paper or open up your notes app and write down that SMART goal we just talked about.
I love that. And don't worry if it feels a little bit silly. It's amazing how such a simple action can actually make a real difference. It's like you're taking that very first step towards making this goal actually real.
All right, so we've defined our goal. We've put pen to paper, literally.
Yeah.
Now what?
Well, even with a SMART goal, something like writing a whole novel can still seem pretty daunting.
Right. Yeah.
The next crucial step the episode highlighted was breaking down these big goals into smaller, bite-sized pieces. We don't have to climb the entire mountain in one go.
They use that great example of training for a 5K. Instead of fixating on the whole race, you start with just a manageable walk around the block.
Exactly. And each time you lace up your shoes and complete that walk, you're not only building up your physical endurance, but you're also building mental resilience. Each step, no matter how small it seems, is a victory worth celebrating.
It's like those small wins fuel the engine, keep us motivated for the long haul. So thinking about your novel, what's one tiny step you could take right now today towards making that dream a reality?
Maybe it's spending just 15 minutes brainstorming character ideas, or sketching out a rough outline, or even just researching writing software or online communities for novelists.
Yeah, those are great starting points. It's about taking action, even if it feels insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But action breeds momentum, and momentum is what carries us forward.
Absolutely. It's like that old saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. We've taken those first few steps now. We've defined our goal. We made it real by actually writing it down. And we've even identified a starting point. Now it's time to build a plan to actually reach the summit.
Okay, and that's a perfect segue to the next section. This episode had some great advice about creating a solid action plan. It's like, okay, we've got our destination in mind, but what are the actual roads we need to take to get there?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's about creating that roadmap, complete with those rest stops and detours and scenic routes. But before we dive into all the specifics of building that roadmap, let's take a quick moment to reflect on the small steps you've already taken.
Because even those small actions are a really big deal. They're proof that you're committed to making this happen.
And remember, you're not alone on this journey. This deep dive, this whole conversation. It's all about giving you the tools and support you need to achieve those goals that really matter to you. So take a deep breath and let's get ready to map out our route to success.
All right, so we're ready to build that roadmap to success that we were just talking about. The source we're looking at today, they talked a lot about creating a solid action plan. It makes sense. Even on a road trip, sometimes those scenic detours, they can turn into dead ends if you don't plan them out.
It's like having that detailed itinerary. You know what sites you want to see where you'll stop for gas, and you've even factored in potential traffic jams. Having a plan like that, it just gives you this sense of control, even when those unexpected things pop up.
Right, and those unexpected things are bound to happen. Life rarely goes exactly according to plan. The source even mentioned that while an action plan is super important, being flexible is just as important.
It really is this balancing act. You need the structure to stay on track, but then you also need to be able to adapt when those curveballs inevitably come your way. Like, remember that time I decided to train for a marathon?
Oh, yeah, wasn't that the year you ended up moving across the country?
Exactly. My super meticulously planned training schedule went totally out the window.
Right.
But, instead of giving up entirely, I just shifted my focus to shorter runs and I started exploring new trails in my new city. It wasn't the marathon I'd originally envisioned, but it still kept me moving, and I ended up discovering some pretty amazing hidden gems in my neighborhood.
I love that you turned it into a positive. It's a good reminder that sometimes those unexpected changes, they can actually lead to even better outcomes than you could have imagined. Okay, so back to this action plan. How can we apply all this to your novel? We've got the goal writing 500 words a day for 3 months. What might an action plan for that look like?
Okay, well, first we need to break down those 3 months into smaller, more manageable chunks. Maybe we focus on weekly goals like completing 3,500 words every week. And then we could even schedule specific writing times into your day, like maybe blocking off an hour each morning before work.
Yeah, that's a great point about scheduling. The source mentioned that consistency and routine are key. It's not just about finding the time, it's about making the time.
Exactly. And it's also about setting yourself up for success. Maybe that means setting phone reminders or creating a dedicated writing space that's totally free from distractions.
Oh, and I remember they talked about anticipating obstacles too. So in your case, what might throw you off track? Maybe a super busy week at work or a sudden wave of writer's block.
Oh, for sure. Knowing those potential roadblocks in advance can really help us prepare for them. So if I know a busy work week is coming up, I might adjust my writing schedule and aim for, just shorter bursts of writing throughout the day instead of that one dedicated hour. Or if writer's block hits, I have a whole list of go-to prompts or exercises that I can use to get my creative juices flowing again.
It's like having a backup plan for your backup plan. That's a great way to stay motivated, even when things get a little bit tough. Which actually brings us to another key takeaway from the source fueling that inner fire that keeps us going.
Yeah, motivation. It's the engine that really drives us towards our goals. And like any engine, it needs the right fuel to keep running smoothly. And the source, they had some really fantastic tips on this, from the power of visualization to, building a supportive community.
Yeah. They talked about spending just a few minutes each day actually visualizing yourself, achieving that goal, really feeling that sense of accomplishment. It sounds a little woo-woo at first, but there's actual science behind it, right?
Oh, totally. Think about Olympic athletes. They use visualization techniques all the time to mentally rehearse their performances. It's all about training your mind to see success as an actual possibility. So imagine yourself holding that finished manuscript in your hands, feeling the weight of it, maybe even smelling that fresh ink.
Okay, now I'm getting chills. I can almost feel it. But we all know motivation can kind of ebb and flow. That's where having a support system comes in, right?
Absolutely. Having those people in your corner cheering you on and offering encouragement can really make all the difference. They could be your sounding board, your accountability partners, your biggest fans. The source really emphasized the power of shared experiences and, having people to celebrate those wins with big or small.
That's so true. We don't have to go it alone. But even with the best support system in the world, there are days when we need that little extra push, to stay on track. That's where those little rewards come in handy.
Yes. Remember, the source mentioned the idea of positive reinforcement, like rewarding ourselves for hitting those milestones. It's a great way to build those positive associations with the whole process, even when it's challenging.
I'm all about that. When I'm working on a big project, I'll give myself a little reward after each chapter or section, Maybe it's a fancy coffee, a long walk in nature, or even just permission to binge watch an episode of my favorite show guilt-free.
Exactly. It's about finding what really works for you. What are those little treats or indulgences that bring you joy and make you feel recharged?
So thinking about your novel again, what kind of rewards could you build into your action plan? What would make you feel, motivated and excited to keep writing?
Well, I really love trying new coffee shops. So maybe I'll reward myself with a visit to a new cafe after finishing each chapter. Or maybe it's allowing myself to buy a new book, but one I can only read once I hit a certain word count goal.
I love those ideas. It's like you're creating these little milestones to look forward to along the way.
Exactly. It's about making the journey enjoyable, not just focusing on the destination. And speaking of enjoying the journey, let's shift gears a bit and talk about another crucial aspect of goal setting that the source highlighted: staying committed, but also knowing when to adjust our course.
It's like having a compass to guide us even when the terrain gets a little rough.
And that's where the next part of our conversation gets really interesting.
Okay, so we've talked about setting those SMART goals right and like breaking them down and creating those action plans. And we even talked about, building in those little rewards along the way to keep us motivated. But like with any journey, sometimes we just hit those, unexpected detours.
That's true. Life very rarely goes, perfectly according to plan. And the source we've been looking at today, they really emphasize the importance of staying committed to your goal, but also being adaptable.
It's like having that inner compass guiding us, even when things get a little rough. They talked about knowing when to kind of adjust our course, maybe even redefining our goals along the way.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. Remember when I was talking about training for that marathon, and I ended up moving across the country? Well, it wasn't just the training schedule that had to change. My whole definition of success had to shift.
Right. Instead of being laser focused on completing the marathon, you discovered this new love for exploring those running trails in your new city. It wasn't the exact goal that you started with, but it was still progress, and it sounds like it brought you a lot of joy.
Exactly. Sometimes those detours, they can lead us to even more fulfilling destinations than we could have imagined. I think the key is to just stay open to those possibilities and not be afraid to adjust our sails when we need to.
This whole deep dive has been so insightful. We've covered so much from, the nitty-gritty of those SMART goals to the importance of flexibility and, even finding those little sparks of motivation along the way.
It's amazing how much practical wisdom we've unpacked from just this one source. It feels like we've equipped ourselves with a whole toolkit for success, no matter what goals we're going after.
Before we wrap up, though, I'd love to leave our listeners with a little challenge. Something actionable they can take away from this deep dive. What's one tiny step they could take today to move just a little bit closer to a goal they've been dreaming of?
That's a great idea. And, it really doesn't have to be some big monumental thing. It could be as simple as spending 5 minutes brainstorming some ideas, or making a quick phone call to gather some information, or even just writing down that goal on a sticky note and putting it somewhere you'll see it every day.
I love that. It's about taking that initial step, no matter how small it might seem. Because, action creates momentum, and momentum is what carries us forward.
Absolutely. Progress over perfection every time.
Yeah.
It's okay to start small and adjust as you go. The important thing is just to get started and, celebrate those little wins along the way.
This deep dive has been a fantastic reminder that achieving our goals, it really is within reach when we approach them with a clear plan, a positive mindset, and a willingness to embrace the entire journey, not just the destination.
Well said. It's been great diving deep into this topic with you. And to our listener, we hope you feel empowered and inspired to take those first steps toward making your dreams a reality.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of goal setting and achievement. We'll see you next time. But until then, keep learning, keep striving, and remember, every journey starts with just a single step.